I'm Evan Elkin, Executive Director of Reclaiming Futures, and our annual meeting is when we bring leaders together from within our community and also invite experts from the field of juvenile justice, public health, treatment, the schools, to talk about how we can improve outcomes for youth. Reclaiming Futures is a national juvenile justice reform initiative designed to bring sound public health principles and effective treatment practices to juvenile justice and other youth-serving systems around the country. Our next panel will be a discussion of restorative practices and behavioral health in schools. As we're all increasingly aware, the zero tolerance or exclusionary discipline practices that became nearly universal in America's schools beginning in the 90s not only failed to live up to the promise of improving school safety, but have in fact had the opposite effect. Exclusionary school discipline policies have had disastrous collateral consequences for the communities and for the climates in the schools where our most vulnerable students need to learn. This has affected disabled youth, LGBT youth, gender nonconforming youth, but most acutely the collateral consequences have affected youth of color and even more acutely girls of color, defining what is commonly referred to as the school-to-prison pipeline. Our next panel, moderated by Castle Redmond, will talk about the promise of restorative approaches in schools and highlight the innovative work that has come out of Oakland, California. Joining Castle on the panel are Fania Davis, Executive Director of Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth, RJOY. She's a restorative justice scholar, civil rights attorney, and a longtime social justice advocate. David Yusem, an experienced conflict resolution and restorative justice practitioner, and currently the program manager for restorative justice at the Oakland Unified School District. And joining us as well is Betsye Steele, the principal at Ralph J. Bunche, how do we say that? Bunche School, High School in Oakland. I'm going to turn it over to Castle to get us started.
Thank you, Evan. So we're lucky to have an incredible team right here from Oakland Unified, the Oakland Unified School District, to engage with you around this issue of school discipline, restorative justice, and its connection to juvenile justice. We're going to start with a video that is actually a video from Miss Steele's school, Ralph Bunche. You'll see how restorative justice works in that video. We'll have some questions and you'll be able to interact. And we're gonna change it up a little bit, and we're going to be interactive from the beginning. So we won't have a series of presentations, and we think that that's the best way for you to learn at what you want to learn about it. So let's go ahead and start the video.
All eyes on me. I was like sweating in the hands and stuff. I was like nervous. My mom and my dad was there. It made me feel like walking out the damn room. That's what it made me feel like, dude. I feel like just canceling this and be like, nah, I'm good. It was too much attention.
Good evening. I'm really, really happy to see all of the people here to support my man. And I'm excited about how we're gonna make this transition from there to here and beyond. First of all, I don't care about him feeling uncomfortable. I know where that feeling is coming. That feeling is coming from a place where I don't know what's going on here. And this is different. The problem is when a kid doesn't want to be in circle, it's because I don't trust you. So I can't trust that process. So we have more relationship building to do. So Pierre?
I like the quote, self-sufficiency isn't a destination, it is an everlasting journey.
Yeah. This is going to be our talking piece. When you have the talking piece, you're the only one that's talking. But it gives everybody else permission to listen. So the listeners are the most important. We may do a round. So when you were a kid, what you wanted to be when you was little. This kid went through a lot of the same things that I went through when I was a kid. And if not me, definitely somebody that I know. It allows us to empathize when everybody has to answer those questions.
When I was a kid, I always loved working with kids. and so I found the field of school psychology.
And when I was a child, I remember my main thing was wanting to be a cosmetologist.
To be actually still now. I wanted to be a race car driver.
As a kid, I wanted to be a preacher.
When I was a little girl, I really wanted to be a singer.
I just wanted to make my community better.
I've always wanted to be a healer. I think that I'm in the process of doing that now.
I always wanted to be happy, and I am.
And when it gets to Cedric, we're all listening for
My name is Cedric.
what makes him like us.
What I want to do when I was a little kid, play football.
It lets the people in circle know that we're all pretty much the same.
We're here to welcome, support, and navigate him through this school year, and hopefully through the rest of his life. So, in this next round, we're going to agree on the things that we need in order to be able to have this conversation.
This talking piece gives everybody else permission to listen deeply. Without values, we're not listening deeply. We're waiting on our opportunity to talk.
If there's a value that you don't agree with, we're going to do another round and say, I don't agree with that value, we'll talk about it.
Commitment.
Respect.
Always speak your truth.
Integrity.
Compassion. Honesty.
Forgiveness.
Empathy. It's important to be connected.
Discipline. I started noticing that I wasn't here to stereotype me. I was here to help me and see what was going on in my head. So I started to loosen up a little bit. Self-confidence. Last year I didn't have confidence. I would tell too, I always get kicked out of class for smelling like a pound of weed in class, so I was doing bad last year.
An open heart.
All right. We're going to talk about what do you have to give to support Cedric. And I want you to talk directly to Cedric. I'm the person who you can come to any time of day. I am the person who will be your brother, who will be your uncle.
I got your back. I got stuff for you. Come and get it. Especially our kids, study keeping it real. That's their whole life. Who's real, who's not real. And they can tell better than any one of us if you're keeping it real.
And I say this in front of everybody because if I don't, I need all of these people to hold me accountable.
I'm the person that's always going to be honest with you.
I'm the person you can count on. I'm a person you can also just say, hey, I need to talk to you, even if you need that.
But I'm also gonna be that person that loves you to death. All right?
And I am the person who's going to ensure that you will get your high school diploma and beyond with your life.
Make me blush. I don't know, y'all touched me. Y'all touched me. Y'all made me feel like I can do it.
I'm going to be the person that reminds you that you can be whatever you want to be.
At first, I couldn't trust them. But then they looked me dead in the eye. They started telling the truth about how they really felt and what they can do. So I was like, okay, I can give them a chance.
I'm the person who you can relate to in school. I'm a person who is also walking the road of success, and I reach my hand out to you. Walk with me.
Can I get all y'all to do a circle like this for me tomorrow?
The change of the culture begins to form.
So now we're going to talk about needs, which is kind of like the hardest thing that we need to talk about. Whatever your needs are, I don't want you to shy away from them. Let us say no. Don't assume that we're going to say no.
For me, my number one goal is I want him to hear how each one of us are prepared to support him. And I want him to challenge us when he feels like he needs that support that we promised him.
I'm going to need you to be open and fearless because this road to your success is going to be tough. And I will walk through the fire with you, but you got to come with me.
I'm going to need you to have the most confidence in the world where can nobody tell you nothing about your education doesn't come first.
There's never been a situation where everybody in his school life was so concerned about her kids' well-being, and you're gonna be the main focus of that circle. She's never been the main focus of nothing, probably.
Whenever you need to talk to somebody and you need that confidence from someone, call them. And you talk. It doesn't matter.
I never listened to my mom like that, and so
I need you to, grow to be a man who you want to follow from. That's what I need from you. Because sometimes when I ask you, I need some help. And when you feel when I say I need you, you look at me sometimes and give me a head nod. I'm like, no, talk to me. Talk to me. Because I don't know what's on your mind.
I was like, I do have to start talking to him more because I just go out and do whatever I want. I do stuff like my father was supposed to do. Like, I was peer pressured to do all this stuff I was doing. I just did it because my family needed it.
I'd rather not pass on any time being around you. I just want you to grow and understand who you are. Thank you.
I just need to keep myself motivated. But I know I can do it, I just don't be motivated.
Everybody in this room got your back. And I need you to believe when everybody in this room say they're here for you, that you trust us. And I need for you to fall back a little bit from that man role and taking the lead and just be a young man and enjoy this journey to being a man. And one thing that I know so much is that you love that woman right there so much. That's your heart right there. And you would drop on a dime for that your mother. Do you understand? And I know that you carry a heavy load sometimes because you worry about her. You worry about your family. I know that. I worry for you worrying about your family. And sometimes I think your worrying about your family is the reason why you've made some of the decisions in your life that you've made. But those decisions in life need to change because you've got a network of people. And let some of us worry about that load, but you gotta tell us. You gotta tell us. And I need for mom to tell us too, because we wanna help. We're not against you, we for you.
Oh, yeah.
I love your son, and out of loving your son, I love you. Because I know how much he loves you. And we're here for you. I'm gonna be here for you. You hear me? All right.
Mom used to smash on me about me coming in hella late. But I'll be like, I was helping her pay rent and the whole nine. So I really felt like I was the man of the house.
You're not the Cedric on paper.
Yes.
But you're greater than that. On so many levels said, I am you. And I know there's some good things about me, but it took a long time for me to make those changes. And I had to accept people around me and accept the help that they were offering to give me because I was so closed-minded thinking I had to do it all myself. I need you to continue to be more open and more honest because it's all about your growth and development.
And I need to, when there's something getting in the way, tell us so we can help you and be there with you.
What I need from you is to keep coming back to the circle. Bring your successes to the circle to share with others, and bring your challenges back to the circle so we can support your needs.
You need to know how important you are. You're here to do something. I don't know what that is, but it's up to you to figure that out.
I need to break away from the script, and I need to ask Mom, how can we support you? That's where it all comes from.
Basically, I just need everybody to support my son.
Can I have that? Please. Mom is in need. If anybody knows any jobs, because I know that's what be on his mind all the time.
Well, I probably wouldn't be into this if he wasn't struggling. I just did it because my family needed it.
On-campus go-to person. That will be me. What supports are necessary for the student's success, and how will he receive it? What do you need help? Academically.
I need you to know touring will be available.
Absolutely. We have other resources on that's not in this room, and I'll introduce you to all those guys. Who will monitor the plan? Kentrell's going to monitor the plan. Michelle is going to monitor the plan. KP going to monitor the plan. Mama going to monitor the plan.
Have you had an internship yet?
I'm currently in an internship right now.
Excellent.
This is what your plan looks like. Let's come back in 30 days. We're going to look at the progress. Next time we meet, we're going to celebrate. We're going to end this conference by showing Cedric and his mother some love. So everybody, if you would just line up and just offer Cedric and his mother a hand and a smile, and we're just going to show him some love right now.
I never got along with teachers.
It's really heartwarming for me to sit down and collaborate.
And it's time for us to stop being cowards and fix the mess that we made.
This is my first circle, and my heart is dancing.
And our young people don't come to us adults because we don't come through with what we say we're gonna do. Today, I felt like these people in this room meant and said what they mean.
Proud of you.
This circle here was real powerful. You know, just to look at everybody's face and to really say that I love this circle, so thank you.
They cried, they laughed. Now we got to keep our word.
Thank you, everyone. And you saw Miss Steele in the video. That's a great video. That was a intake circle or a welcoming circle. And there are different types in restorative justice, including circles that deal with conflict resolution. So what we're going to do now is have folks discuss in their tables what you saw in your reflections in that video. And we want to answer 3 questions. You can address other things as well, but 3 questions that we want you to take a look at. Number 1, how did it make you feel? How do you think Cedric felt? And what did you think of that mode of communication? And so someone will ask for folks to be able to share some conversations at your table. But okay, so first of all, I don't think I introduced myself. I'm Castle Redmond. I'm a program manager, program officer with the California Endowment. I've been doing that for about 4 years. And I worked for 9 years before that in the Oakland Unified School District. So I know these folks here very well. And I know most of the folks in that circle pretty well also, even though that was filmed recently. So do we want to take some of the stuff that's brought up? Is there anything that struck you that you'd like to respond to from some of the reflections? Any of the 3? Ms. Steele?
In response to, well, actually, I could respond to all of the questions, but I won't take all of the airtime. Mm-hmm. Simply because everybody who was that circle was so effective because everyone in that circle knew and had worked with Cedric in some capacity. So it's not like he didn't know everybody. With regards to prep, we put that circle together in a matter of 24 hours. I got a call and then a visit from the DHP, the disciplinary hearing director. She stopped by, the soup stopped by, the the superintendent, the attorney, school attorney, stopped by to see me. And they stopped by to let me know that the board was going to be sending me Cedric. Why was I getting Cedric? Because Cedric had a gun in his previous school and it went off in the classroom. So, at that point, after I had no other option, I decided that let's make it happen. So the restorative justice coordinator, that's the guy who was facilitating the circle. Between him and myself, we're on the phone in touch with all of Cedric's support team. Next day, everybody shows up. In the meantime, there's other work that has to move forward. I had to schedule a staff meeting that same day because I had to prepare my staff for the entry of Cedric. So a lot of work goes in, and then there was someone else that's what happens after the circle. Well, the process continues. We continue to provide a place for him to be, that space where he now can continue that transformation. And someone made the point that everybody in the circle was transformed, and that is true. Every time you sit in a circle, there's transformation that's happening. Anyone else like to respond to?
Ms. Steele, quick question for you. So had Cedric gone to juvenile hall, or had he been in juvenile hall and then came out? He had then also been removed from his previous school.
Absolutely.
You are a continuation school, so
Absolutely.
Now he's coming to your school. So the idea, I imagine that first folks are cringing and saying, why is he even in your school if he had a gun in his last school? Well, if he's of age, school age, he's gonna have to, as you all know, he has to be somewhere. He has to be in a school. Somebody is going to have to do something with him, and so this is Miss Steele, and it's on you, and this is what you did, 24 hours.
Yes, within 24 hours. And Cedric graduated. He came in at about a 1.5, and he graduated at a 3.5. He went through some trials while he was there, but we continued to work with him because, and one situation is, there was another student at the school who got into it with them. And that other kid just slapped him all over the place. Cedric came in with the bloody eye and let us know what had happened and said, Ms. Steele, I want to graduate. So that's the kind of transformation that we get in our students at our schools.
Great.
I've definitely done welcome circles where the parents didn't want to participate or the mom didn't want to participate. Oftentimes there is just a mom or a grandmother. I remember doing a facilitating welcome circle once, and I called the mom ahead of time and said, we want to welcome your son to school. And she said, well, do I have to be there? And I said, you don't have to be there, but it would be great if you could come, and we'd like to welcome you to this school as well. And she sort of begrudgingly said, yes, I'll come, and then she didn't show up at the welcome circle, so we had the welcome circle anyway. So someone had a question about, are the parents always there? I would say most welcome circles at other schools do not have that many people in it, but the integrity of the process is the same, which is it's a circle for an individualized support. So it's a circle for one student and his or her family to identify their needs, what they need to be successful and graduate from school. Who's the go-to person at that school? Who's the go-to person when they're not at school? What are the adults and the other students in that circle going to do to support that student so that they feel welcome? It actually just makes sense, really, to welcome people to school when they come in new. It often doesn't happen, or it's overlooked. They just kind of get thrown into school. And I remember doing a welcome circle once when I said, it actually happened to be 2 weeks after he had come to school at a high school, and we couldn't do it right when he showed up. And one of the questions we asked was, so how's it been going these 2 weeks? And he was like, well, I'm in this algebra class and I've never had algebra, and this is in January. And so we identified something that just clearly wasn't going to work for him, right? He's in mid-year algebra, having never taken algebra. So we were able to rectify that. Also, just before I pass it over to Fania, this is, like I mentioned, this is what we call this a tier 3 circle. This is a circle for individualized support, a circle for one student to support that student. But we also have other types of circles at school with the focus on the connective tissue, as Dr. Hardy said, the fabric of the community being intact. And so the tier 1 type of circle that we do is for everybody in that school: parents, community-based organizations, after-school providers, therapists, teachers, administrators, students, siblings, anybody who's part of that school ecology should have access to community building, to be a part of the community, to feel like they're in relationship with each other, and very importantly, have an equitable space for dialogue. Because oftentimes marginalization will happen in the classroom because there's no equity. The students' cultural perspectives or cultural values are not present in the classroom. And so the talking piece, you called it the peace rock, we call it a talking piece, that provides that equitable space. Everybody has a chance to listen and be heard, and it'll go around. And you can pass as long as you remain present, which is one of our core guidelines. And what that circle does is it may seem pithy or something that maybe classroom doesn't have enough time to do, but the fact is, to do a circle in the classroom that allows the students' values and cultural perspectives to come through, where everyone has a voice, where they can co-create values and guidelines together, that's where you begin to eliminate racial disparities in discipline. Because students are intentionally not marginalized. They're brought into the class, they are in relationship with everyone in the class, and they feel a part of the community. And not only that, their social emotional skills, which are crucial to learning and being engaged as a learner, are passively being learned and explicitly being taught. So, for an example, sitting in a circle just waiting for that talking piece to come to you, you're exhibiting many social emotional core competencies like self-awareness, social awareness, responsible decision making, relationship skills, all those social emotional competencies that we need to ultimately, number one, feel safe in the classroom, but also to engage our frontal lobe so that we can then cite evidence from a text and argue persuasively our perspective. Does that make sense? And so we need that safe space. We need to do these kinds of circles in order to get there. And then the tier 2 type of circles are around conflict and harm, which is what most people think of when they think of restorative justice, is a response to harm as a way of healing harm. And so those are the 3 tiers. That's the model that we use, that we scaffolded on, with the example you just saw here being a tier 3 type of circle.
Thank you. And Ms. Steele, she's able to pull that together in 24 hours because that school is constantly doing tier 1 circles. That's part of the culture, doing circle. So things are handled in circle. So that everyone can feel, even the new student and new family can feel like this is part of the culture. They're not just pulling something together because of something big like this. That doesn't work.
Yes.
Fania, you wanted to?
Yeah, and that school, by using tier 1 circles, which are community building circles, where there's an opportunity to create safe spaces in the classrooms and build trust and feel a stronger sense of community. Because of those kinds of circles and because of the tier 2 circles, which address conflict after it has occurred. However, we try to do way more of those preventive circles, those community reconstruction circles, than the conflict circles. But as a result of these kinds of circles, the whole school environment transformed, and within 2 years, violence was completely eliminated at a school which is meant for juvenile justice-involved youth. It's a continuation school. Violence was completely eliminated. Can I get a hand on that? Yeah. Not only that, but suspensions were reduced, the suspension rates were reduced by almost 80% in 2 years. And that's really important when we talk about interrupting the school-to-prison pipeline. Because we know that when a child is suspended once, their chance of being incarcerated triples. It triples, and their chance of dropping out doubles. And once they drop out, their chance of being incarcerated is about 67%. So keeping a child in school is the greatest and strongest protective factor against incarceration. And keeping a child out of juvenile jail is the greatest way of keeping them out of adult jail. So that's really, really important. And I just want to share a term with you. It's sawubona. Does anyone know that term? It's a South African, sawubona. Actually, the plural is sanibonani. This is the Zulu greeting that's used in South Africa traditionally. And it means, I see you. I see your goodness. I see your spirit. I see who you truly are. So much of our work is about that. And it's simple in some ways, and in other ways it's very difficult because all of our systems are stacked against, seeing our youth. Once our youth are seen and heard, as Cedric was, then they can thrive. Once they feel a sense of belonging, a sense of community from sitting in these circles, they thrive. And there are many stories of youth who come in with a 0.0 grade point average, not expected to graduate, with 150 suspensions, with 5 or 6 arrests or more. They finally get to the doorstep of a school like Miss Steele's at the 11th grade, and then their lives turn around. We have so many stories like that. They get to a restorative school where they're greeted with love, where they feel that they found family. For the first time, they like teachers. You heard Cedric say, I never liked teachers before, because I thought they were going to try to stereotype me, because that's the way a lot of our youth feel, unfortunately, about their experiences in schools. But they get to a school where they feel love. And this reminds me of Dr. King's definition of justice. Justice is love correcting that which revolts against love. Justice is love. And also justice is right relationship, or being in just relationship. That's a biblical definition of justice. So this work is very relational. It's based on a relational view of justice. And it's all about creating that sense of home, of a psychological home, an existential home that Dr. Hattie said was missing for so many of our youth. Creating, I call them liberated spaces. It's so important for our youth to thrive.
Thank you, Fania. We have about 20 more minutes. Let's take some more questions.
In 2011, our statistics at Oakland Unified School District we were about 33% African American, yet those same African American students made up 67% of the suspensions. So that's a violation of their civil rights. There was a study done by the Urban Strategies Council in partnership with Oakland Unified School District that detailed these statistics. And the school district had already known that this was a problem for many years, and had already formed the Office of African American Male Achievement, which the goal of that office was to, if we can uplift the most marginalized among us, then ultimately that will uplift everyone. And so based on that Urban Strategies Council report, the Federal Office for Civil Rights through the Department of Education came and investigated the school district, and they found, what we already knew, which was that we were violating the civil rights of our African American students. Not true with any other race or ethnicity in our school district, just the African American students, and boys more than girls, but not much more. And so on September 27th of 2012, we entered into a voluntary agreement with the Federal Office for Civil Rights. It wasn't us. They could have sanctioned us or sued us or do what they do in a punitive sense, but instead we entered into a voluntary agreement with them that's called the Voluntary Resolution Plan. And that plan details that over 5 years, starting with that date in 2012, we were going to drastically reduce suspensions and our racially disproportionate discipline of African American students. And we have 4 strategies that are listed here in order to do that. And they're based on effective strategies that we'd already been using in the school district, restorative justice being one of those strategies. Because if you look at this slide right here, you'll see this data is from the beginning of this school year that just ended. And so, well, actually, it's from the year before that, but I put this together at the beginning of this school year. So you can see, for example, that Ralph Bunche School, which is where Ms. Steele is the principal, drastically reduced their suspensions, 81% from the year before. The year before they reduced their suspensions, I think it was 91%. So, and where it says disproportionality eliminated, that's what happened. They eliminated their racial disparities in discipline of their African American students. That is something that isn't something that's just said and done at one time. It's a constant conscious and intentionality around that you have to maintain. So these strategies here, the restorative justice strategy is the one that we're talking about today, and next year we'll probably be in 30 plus schools implementing whole school restorative justice. To transform the culture, actually to make a revolution, really, a revolution in the way education is done. Trauma-informed practices, which Dr. Hardy talked a lot about today, and I recognize a lot of what he talked about as the work that we are also doing in Oakland Unified School District around teaching with a trauma-informed lens. If you don't have a trauma-informed lens and you're doing work in Oakland Unified, you're doing a disservice to the students and families that go to school there. Everything we do must be in a trauma-informed lens. And so there's lots of professional learning around that and constant attention to operating in that way. And then culturally responsive instruction, that would be through the Department of African American Male Achievement. We have a program called the Manhood Development Program that's been quite successful, where schools have an African American male who teaches a group of mostly African American male students, not totally African American, but mostly African American, to uplift them so that they can love themselves and know their culture and know who they are, so that they know where they come from, so they know where they're going to be going. And then positive behavior intervention supports, or PBIS, it's often known as PBIS, which is a framework for acknowledging, creating expectations in school and then acknowledging students exhibiting those positive expectations rather than focusing on the negative. And it's a evidence-based practice for reducing disproportionate discipline. So that's sort of the voluntary resolution plan in a nutshell. Is there anything that I missed that you? Okay.
You know, and there's one thing I feel like that we want to also make sure we share is that in those schools with restorative justice where suspensions went down, academic achievement also went up. And where suspensions went down the most, academic achievement went up the most for all students. And that we see that across the board, across the state, across the country. That's the ecosystem, and that's the culture change that has this larger benefit. Other questions, and then
I just want to add one thing because you mentioned that. Okay. That is that we just did a report, a share out of our implementation practices, which you can find on our website, the OUSD website. And we found some other things that happened that we really weren't even focusing on, but if you compare restorative justice sites to non-restorative justice sites, things like chronic absence decreased much more than non-RJ sites. Reading levels went up incredibly at restorative justice sites versus non-RJ sites. Graduation rates, and I'm not going to say that's because of restorative justice, because there's all kinds of promising, innovative strategies that we're using at all of our schools. But when you look at the schools that are doing restorative justice and the ones that aren't, there is a pretty distinct difference.
What happens is, once you move into the restorative stance, then school leaders become more focused and more intentional in those specific areas. When he talked about reading scores, after we moved into the restorative justice stance, then I planned into my site plan a literacy component that was very, very targeted on raising the reading level of the students, because many of the students come with a very low reading level. In addition, this year, we call them big rocks. In addition, this year, we have literacy as one big rock. We have suspension. Well, suspension isn't even one of the big rocks anymore, because it's just, the culture is holding that. Attendance, because we saw the results of attendance beginning to rise, then what do we do to be more intentional to get it to the next level? So we use the restorative process in all of those areas, in those big rocks. We make sure that within our professional development, the restorative justice piece is there, the cultural proficiency piece is there, the trauma professional development piece is there. We have the African American male classes built into the master schedule. No add-ons, no add-ons. It all has to be a part of the process.
We have another question here, and then I'm going to ask you a question. So that actually leads right into my question for Ms. Steele about your transformation. And you suspended students. So in reality, to get that, you need the school leaders, the principals themselves. If the district isn't doing it, it's because they don't think their principals are going to do it, and they're afraid to push on their principals. They're afraid of their principals because they have a lot of power. And so I want to find out, how'd you go through that, your transformation? What'd they call you?
Well, I used to be referred to as the suspension queen. I remember when I started out earlier as a principal, I moved to this one school, and when I took over the reins, I had a list of 11 African American males. And that list said, these kids have to go if you want to run this school. So within the first 12 weeks, I had suspended and DHP'd 12 African American males.
DHP is a referral for expulsion.
So after that, I started looking at myself internally. Not from the outside, but internally. So there has to be that transformation to where we come to the realization that suspensions aren't working. So why are we doing it over and over again? It's more work, it's more time, it's not helping anybody, attendance rates are going down, the whole bit. But yes, it has to begin with the leadership. And we have to come to terms with who we are. We have to look at our cultural proficiency level. We have to look at our assumptions about the students that we are serving. And once we do that and truly begin to look at that piece, that's where the transformation begins. None of the things could have happened at Ralph Bunche if I hadn't become a transformed person myself. So that's where the leadership, that's where it all begins, right there with the leadership.
And if I can just sort of riff on that. I was working, or my organization, Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth, which actually did the first pilot program in Oakland that was so successful in reducing suspension rates by 87%, completely eliminating violence, increasing test scores, that the school district became very interested. And with some organizing by youth, by 2010, just a couple of years later, the district adopted a resolution adopting restorative justice as official school policy. So what I was going to talk about, Ms. Steele. We were at a school doing another pilot program, and Ms. Steele was the suspension queen at that school. She did a training with us and even said things like, oh yeah, this will work for our kids, this will work for our kids. And this is not unusual. But that paradigm shift of responding to youthful wrongdoing in a restorative and a healing way rather than a punitive way was hard to come by, even with that verbal buy-in. And for Ms. Steele, I think it was yours actually sitting in a circle that allowed you to make that shift, that paradigm shift.
Absolutely.
Want to talk a little bit about that?
You can hear about it, you can see it, that's objective. But once you sit in that circle, that's when the transformation really begins, because you begin to trust at a different level. You begin to appreciate others at a different level. You begin to give yourself that space to be who you are when you sit in those circles. So that's really where it begins. And when we talk about that shift from the inside out, it changes the way you think when you sit in those circles. It changes the way when you change the way you think, then you begin to change the way you do things. And the one thing that those circles taught me in that transformation process is relationship, relationship, relationship. Mm-hmm. So what you saw there is that relationship. And the circles allow you to tell your story, and as you're telling your story, then you begin to learn how to allow the students and your staff and others to tell their story. So when we move to that place to where we become humble enough, it's really about cultural humility. When we become humble enough to back up, be able to tell our stories, then, and hear our stories, then we learn how to hear other stories, and then is when we begin to connect.
One more question?
Did you want to take it?
We both can.
Okay, I'll just go first. Well, we have a behavioral health unit in our school district, and I'm in the behavioral health unit, so restorative justice and positive behavior supports is out of the behavioral health unit. At other school districts, like Chicago, and restorative justice tends to be out of the social emotional learning unit or other units, but in our school district, it comes out of behavioral health. Schools have what's called a COS, which is a coordination of services team, and I'm going to let Ms. Steele talk about that. Almost every school has at least one mental health therapist. So restorative justice it's a philosophy, it's a way of being, it's a set of principles and practices, but it's not everything, and it's not therapy. Although therapists also use it as well. But you're correct, this is a public health model. This is a prevention model. There's spaces for intervention after a harm has happened to allow for accountability and healing via that accountability. And there's a space for individualized support for students who need it. Just like some students need mental health, therapy, individualized support on that level too. But our main focus, 90% of our focus at the school district is on the preventative, that public health model piece. But I would say 100% of our students in Oakland experience trauma, at the very least vicariously, if not acute and on complex levels. And so if you look at the city of Oakland and you were to map 12 years of homicides, which is how long a student's in our schools, you would see basically every student at every school would be within that range of either witnessing a homicide or knowing someone who's been killed or something. So that's why I mentioned trauma awareness being so important. And so we need not only safe places for students to feel safe at school and to begin to leave that cycle of harm that trauma can cause, but we also need to have trauma screening tools and people that can work with youth on individual levels to deal with that.
At the school site level, we have our therapist on site. And what happens is I meet with, at the beginning, when I bring students in and families in, I bring in the students and the family, and I meet with every one of them. And as I do my initial assessment of the needs of the children, not only the academics and all of the other pieces, then we also look at the mental health support need, public health support need. Many of them come with public health providers. As a matter of fact, I think in my initial meeting with Mr. Redmond at another school, I was trying to figure out how to pull all those different players together. Well, now we pull them all together by that initial assessment and then involving everyone in that cost team or in that cost circle. Very, very important. The other thing that I do, which is very important, is that when I have that initial meeting with the parents, that initial circle, we don't discuss the discipline piece. As a matter of fact, when we get to that point, I'll hold it up and look at them and tell them we're at a new place and time. This doesn't come with you. And we go through the ritual of having the student just rip it up right in front of me, right in front of everybody in the meeting, a circle, and throw it in the garbage can. So that student feels that he's coming to get the whole support, the mental health support, the academic support, all of those pieces at the same time.
If I could just quickly riff on that. It reminds me of a South African ritual that's traditionally done. When children misbehave, the whole village encircles them and speaks into the circle and into the child, pours into the child. All of their beauty, all of their gifts are spoken to them, so they remember who they are. And that's a large part of why this school has been so successful. In eliminating violence and increasing academic scores and completely transforming the climate. And it's becoming a district-wide phenomenon with restorative justice having been at one school only in 2006. Today, in about 30, and just a couple of weeks ago, the superintendent announced that he would be expanding restorative justice to the rest of the schools and announced $2.3 million would be put into supporting restorative justice and some of those other programs that are listed there.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And by the way, I am now known as the Queen Mother.
All right. On that note, someone had said that, it brought up from the audience that, and we're ending here, is that it just could have been with Cedric, this could have been done earlier. And just think about it, if this kind of circle process, this kind of welcoming, this kind of sense of making him and his family feel like they belong, if that could have been done earlier in high school, in middle school, in elementary school, what kind of different experience could Cedric have had throughout his life and in school? And we talk a lot about push out, but those of us who worked a long time in schools know that what schools also don't do enough just to hold on to their kids, right? There's so much more we can do to hold our kids there. And if you were working in the justice system and other systems, push the school districts to do that. That you can push on, the other systems can really push on the school district to make these kinds of changes. Judges, Juvenile court judges, especially, have incredible power with school superintendents. And I'll leave it with that. Thank you very much. And thank you to the panel. Let's give the panel a great round of applause.